Great. Okay. So welcome and thank you for joining us, our webinar today. We're glad you can make it. If you're watching on replay, hello to you too, and thanks for watching. Today, the Dayshape team will be discussing all things capacity planning, taking a look at the key challenges facing firms today and how resource management software can help tackle them. Please note, we'll be recording our webinar today, and our team will send out a link to the recording so you can watch, replay at a later date or share with your team. Please also feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A or any comments in the chat at any time, and we'll be sure to answer these for you at the end or in follow-up with you after our webinar. So if we're ready, I'll hand you over to our CEO and co-founder of Dayshape, Andrew Bone. Andrew, over to you.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Thanks, Lara. So to introduce myself, I'm Andrew Bone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Dayshape. My background is both as a software engineer, and I also trained as a chartered accountant with one of the big four. So I've got experience of the techie side of software, but I also know firsthand what it's like to be resource managed. I'd always dreamed of starting my own business, and back in 2013, decided to finally do something about it, and was kicking around ideas with a good friend of mine, Dr. Alistair Andrew. Al's background is in AI, and he and I saw a great opportunity to combine forces, bringing his technical know-how and my experience of the industry, and that's really where Dayshape was born. Dayshape, in our small way, we aim to improve people's working lives, and that really boils down to allowing people to plan their projects better. We believe that helps in a number of ways. So for the staff, the people on the ground, we're all about trying to empower them, give them more flexibility. And then for the resource managers, trying to make their lives easier, more efficient, and ultimately for the firms as well, making the firms more profitable. And we don't believe those things are a zero-sum game. I'm delighted today to also be joined by Stuart Coetzee. Stu, do you want to say hi?
Hello everyone, I am Stuart Coetzee. I am one of the enterprise account executives here at Dayshape, which basically means I help large organizations buy AI software like Dayshape. It's been something I've been doing for a number of years now, helping improve people's working lives through the use of technology, improving efficiencies beyond the obvious benefits of a software like this, which obviously helps improve your margin. And that's kind of really what I do.
Thanks, Stuart. So let's just quickly outline the agenda. I'm going to dive straight into the capacity planning challenge, what we mean by that, and some of the common pressures that it puts onto firms. We're going to have a little poll in there as well, so don't nod off. Then I'll talk through a few key strategies that we believe can help make capacity planning better. And then Stuart's going to wrap up the session with a very short teaser of Dayshape itself, and bring some of those strategies to life for you. So the capacity planning challenge, what do we actually mean by that in the context of a large professional services firm? Well, capacity planning for us is all about the process of aligning your resources, your people and their time to the client work that you've got coming now and in the future. So it's all about balance. How are you going to meet that demand with your team? And the balance, it has to be a balance between two things. If you don't have enough capacity, capacity is always a limited resource, regardless of how much you have. If you don't have enough capacity and you overcommit yourself in terms of client work, then obviously your team suffer. And we're going to be talking about some of the negative impacts of that. But also on the flip side, if you have too much capacity and not enough work, then your team is underutilized. And clearly that's bad for your profit margins as a firm. To make matters worse, of course, client work is very unpredictable. We've done a lot of work with audit firms and I've yet to meet anyone in an audit practice who tells us that capacity planning is easy. But it obviously becomes even harder to predict with work that doesn't repeat like an audit. So advisory or some tax work becomes even more challenging. Capacity planning isn't a new challenge. If you're in the accounting sector, then you might have seen some of these headlines from the last few years. It's a pressure that seems to be growing, and we believe there's a number of factors at play here as to why it's an increasing pressure. Firstly, there's a lot of evidence that the new graduates coming into the workplace are maybe looking for something slightly different from previous generations. So there's a big focus on work-life balance. I think maybe that's not just graduates, maybe that's becoming more widespread across the full workforce. So firms that maybe were built on an assumption of people doing 70, 80-hour weeks on a regular basis, maybe that's not going to be the case anymore, and those firms are going to struggle to hire and retain their staff. Secondly, there's a lot more competition in the market now with the large tech companies, startups, fintech. There's a lot of buzz around these companies, and accounting firms are competing for the top graduate talent with those other firms that are perhaps newer into the market. It's also harder to bring in talent from overseas into the UK. We're not going to get into Brexit on this session, but there has been evidence, for example, of many chartered accountants, and thousands I'm talking about here, who were working in the UK but were originally qualified in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, actually making the decision to return back home. And then finally, specifically within the audit sector, there is a lot of regulation coming in the next couple of years. We've got ISQM1 coming in towards the tail end of 2022, and then the Audit Reporting Governance Authority being launched in 2023. And both of those are anticipated to have an impact on the resources required for audit work specifically. I think quite rightly, it's been identified that some of the big audit scandals and failures over the last few years have come down to, one of the root causes has been a lack of resource and a lack of suitably skilled and experienced resources. So there is a big focus coming onto that. In an ideal world, of course, you would put your project plan together and it would be plain sailing. So you would plan what resources you need, people would be assigned to that work, and then it would all happen exactly on schedule. But we know in the real world that that never happens. So maybe your plan is overly ambitious, maybe your client lets you down and doesn't deliver what they're meant to be doing, or perhaps it's your staff call off sick or just need extra help and support that you weren't anticipating. And so when that capacity crunch happens, which is inevitable in a professional services environment, firms have a number of different options open to them of what they can do in that short term to provide a short-term solution to that. And this is where I want you to listen up, because there's going to be a poll coming in a second, because we're interested in hearing what your firm does. Option one is that firms can simply ask their team to do more, to work longer hours. The risk of that, obviously, is that the staff then perhaps burn out and the firm might have a bad reputation as a place to work and so on. Option two is you could extend the client deadline. So if you're able to negotiate with your client and ask them to push back the deadlines, then perhaps that is a way of buying yourself more time. You're risking here the client being dissatisfied, and depending on the nature of the work, and if it's a regulated sort of thing, then that might just not be feasible. And option three is you could decrease the scope of your work. So actually do less stuff in the time available. Again, you're risking your client satisfaction on this one, but it might be a good choice in some cases. It's also worth pointing out here, we don't always mean that this is necessarily a conscious choice by the leadership of a firm to decrease scope or the management of an engagement. It could simply be the fact that the staff are all working till midnight and they end up just inevitably having to cut corners because they feel that that's the only option open to them. So that's another way that decreasing the scope can effectively happen by accident. So we're going to open up a quick poll. We're really interested to hear, what does your firm do if you're hit with the capacity crunch? Option one, increase workload, or two, extend deadlines, or three, decrease scope. And while you're all voting there, I'd also add that if you have any other things your firm does that we'd be really interested in hearing, please feel free to add it to the chat or the Q&A. I will give 3 more seconds. All right, so yes, that's the poll. Lara, if you don't mind closing it off there. So yes, the results, as we can see here, increased workload came out top. I'm not really surprised to hear that. 60% of people gave that response. So yeah, thanks for taking part in that. And I guess that is a fairly typical response I would have expected to see here. It's certainly in the accounting industry, professional services industry, famous for long hours at times. But as we discussed, that risks burnout, and it's really then you can get into a vicious cycle whereby your good people leave. You have to get new people in who are less experienced. The staff left behind have to work even harder, and it just becomes even more challenging. So let's move on now and talk a little bit about how we can apply some strategies and some different approaches to help with this capacity planning problem, and then we'll go on to the Dayshape demo itself. What we're really talking about here, unsurprisingly, for a tech company, we believe that a tech firm is provides some of the solutions to this challenge. So using resource management software can help firms move towards a more long-term strategic view of capacity planning, and it can also help to handle disruptions in the short term, which are inevitable, in a much more efficient and flexible way. And first up, that really starts by building flexibility into your plan from the very outset. And I mean flexibility in a couple of facets. So firstly, who should do the work? And secondly, when can the work be done? So let me bring it to life with an example. Say an engagement manager says that they need John for an engagement and they need him for the first week in October. Well, we would challenge that. We would say, well, do you actually need John? Or do you just need someone like John? Are you looking for someone with John's skills at John's grade? Perhaps you need someone in John's location. Are these really the things that you're looking for here? And in the first week of October, well, does it have to be the first week of October? Could it be the second week? Could it be the last week in September? Is there any flexibility around that timing? And what Dayshape allows you to do is capture that nuance within a system, which then makes actually delivering and filling that role easier as you move further down the line into the different parts of the process. That really then also has another big knock-on benefit, which it unlocks the potential to start thinking about your resource planning at a much more national or even potentially international scale, rather than working at a very local level. And this is something that we've seen an increasing trend towards. And I think the rise of remote working that we've all been living and breathing for the last year and a half has accelerated that trend. People now see that it's insane for your team in Edinburgh to be underutilized while your team in Manchester is perhaps absolutely maxed out. There is no sense in that. That's very obvious now that we're all working remotely, and I think it requires good technology to be able to support that sharing of the work. Secondly, we want to make it as easy as possible to be agile in the resource assignment. And there's a couple of things to this as well. So firstly, it's about using the system to help match skills, availability, and other aspects of the work so that it can be as objective and as fair as possible. And that really means then that staff can buy into that process. They know that there isn't favoritism going on here. Again, helping with the staff engagement, which we believe is a huge part of this. And secondly, it should be really easy for resource managers as well. The system should really be helping them to find the right people for the work and potentially automating some of that as well. And that allows resource managers to then give that flexibility to the staff. So if somebody wants a last minute holiday or wants to request a change to maybe work on a different project that they're really interested in, then it should be a case of, well, yeah, no problem, we can shuffle things around. Whereas traditionally, I think that's caused a lot of headaches for a lot of people. And thirdly, it's all about data, really. So the longer term part of capacity planning is really all about data and having good data. So rather than working off sort of a rule of thumb approach, a good resource management system will allow you to capture that demand, what's coming down the tracks. It's also possible to do things like link it up to your CRM system so that you can see that work as early as possible. and then understand through really good data and good reporting where you've got shortfalls, not just in terms of raw numbers, but potentially also looking at where you've got skills gaps and these pinch points. And finally, it's important to point out that then feeds back into your flexible engagement planning at the start. So you're better positioned as you go into new engagements to know that you've got the right resources coming on stream. So those might feel quite abstract right now. And so for the next part, I'm going to hand over to Stuart to bring these to life in Dayshape. So over to you, Stu.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Let me just share my screen very quickly so everybody can see. Hopefully that's all come up okay. Can you see that, Andrew? Yes, good. So here we are. This is obviously the first part of the three-step process that Andrew spoke about. So this is the flexible planning piece within Dayshape. Once we've covered this very briefly, we will go on to the efficient resource allocation piece. And then finally, we'll look at some of the reports and the data that help with that forecasting. Bit of a golden sort of like report, to be perfectly honest. Everybody loves that. I should really sort of highlight here that this is going to be a very brief tour of Dayshape. It's very focused on obviously capacity planning as well, an amuse-bouche, if you will. So please, if you do want to have a slightly more detailed dive with us, or even a very detailed dive with us, we will be more than happy to give you a personalized demo. Just please get in contact with either myself or Andrew. We'd be delighted to set that up for you. So here we are on the sort of like the project planning page, the engagement page, which is obviously where most of the partners, managers on the call will spend their time. And you can see here that we have our team plan view. Now, all of the tasks are different colors and different hours, which should hopefully be quite self-explanatory. But the first piece in flexibility is here on the left. As you can see, we are not requesting people by name. We are requesting people by their grade and their business line and, of course, their location. This means that rather than just like having that odd situation where you have your engagement managers requesting the same member of staff on the same week for two different engagements, it's probably happened to you several times, we have the ability to flex that and allow you to make a better choice on those particular tasks. The next piece, and I'm sure the eagle eye amongst you would have noticed this already, is that each task has a box around them, which we call time bounds. Now, these time bounds indicate that this task can be done anytime within this time frame. And in this case, this particular planning task, so a notoriously flexible task in all lines of service, can be done at any point within this particular period, which is really useful when you're telling the AI roughly where you want these particular things to happen. Whereas these more hard tasks, they allow you to basically say, no, this particular field work must be done in this particular week. So this gives you, again, a lot of flexibility to tell the AI and your resourcing team or your resourcing team exactly which sort of methodology you would like to really follow and where these tasks should sit. And that really allows you to flex your workforce during the busy season. You know, there's slightly fewer pizza parties for certain people if that's the case. Now, once you've actually played with all of this as well, this will also update our live economics. So if we just scroll up a bit, you'll see that we're not just tracking the number of hours that are working as well. We are also tracking the number of actual financial assets against this particular job, putting together a total, comparing that versus the budget, and also allowing us to look at what other KPIs we have as well. But more on that on a different webinar, I'm sure. Now, once we've finished this particular piece, we have effectively planned as flexibly as we can do. There's obviously a lot more on here that we could go into. We now move on to the efficient resource allocation. Now, this is our main view for this, our Gantt chart, like a classic wall planner spreadsheet style scenario. And you can see we've got the time at the top and all of our people in their offices down the left. So obviously quite a London heavy team, this one, but we've got quite a few people up in Edinburgh, a nice person joining in from Beijing. And we've got all of our unassigned tasks down at the bottom. Now, there's a number of features we have in here that really help you, again, flex your capacity. The first is you need to understand where you're double booked. So we have a really neat little feature which we called clashes or clash resolution. And it's a filter view. And you can see, here's one I made earlier, that this one is clashing up here. Any clash sort of like tasks will be highlighted. So if I click on this one, it will tell me what it is. So this is Boris Johnson COVID recovery plan. No surprise, that's come in as a bit of a last minute thing. And I can now want to try and find an alternative individual to assign this task to. So I'm actually going to remove that filter and now have a look at my total population and find an alternative person. Using our suitability scoring, someone is highlighted already. You cast your eyes over here to the left, you'll see that there is the perfect fit in terms of Francisco here. So I'm just going to drag and drop the task onto them, and Bob is your uncle, Bojo is your uncle in this case. Our task is solved, and we have now resolved that particular clash. Click save, and off we go. Now, there's other ways of doing this in a tool with our AI, but this is definitely the most user-friendly and manual one that obviously is quite easy to do, as you can see. The next thing we can do in relation to capacity planning is that each resource has a number of weekly hours assigned to them. In this case, it's 37.5. If I now flick over to our show availability view, as you can see, we've got a number of different views in here, but this is definitely the most useful one. We can see roughly which of our staff members are overbooked or underbooked. So going back to our Boris Johnson task, we can see that this is actually now an underutilization. But if we look at our friend Craig here, he is highly overutilized. Look at that, nearly working a 50-hour week there. Please, someone get that man a cup of coffee in the morning when they come into the office, as I'm sure they'll be tired. And it's quite easy to just quickly look through your staff and see who is or isn't over assigned. In this case, this is actually customer data that we have mirrored. So, you know, this is definitely showcasing exactly how well it can go if you are staying on top of this properly. This is a very good team. This team is obviously a little bit less busy, as you can see. Now, once you've got all this together, if you think about putting the two elements, you're planning your tasks more flexible and you've got more focus to assign them in a more flexible manner, we now get onto that long-term forecasting piece, because if you've got, you know, an accurate delta between what is actually happening in Dayshape and what is registered on your timesheets, all these reports become much more trustworthy. So now I'm going to click over to our reporting engine. As you can see, this is, you know, relatively like a pivot table style scenario. Obviously, we've learned from our experience that accountancy firms love Excel. We do too. We think it's great, so we try and replicate that where possible. We have the ability to obviously filter this report by whatever we want, and then configure it with the necessary fields we want here. Now, I'm just going to click Run Report. I'm also going to keep it on month as well, so we get like a nice sort of like large scale high view, and run it far into the future. Now, this is going to run through about 3,000 records, so it's definitely not sort of a short period, but it shouldn't hopefully take too long to come through. Hopefully, by the time I finish this sentence, it will be done. There we go, ahead of schedule. I now opened that report. It should pop up and give me the exact number of hours I am short or over by in each of my offices and what grade they are done by. And so you can see here that, you know, in our Abu Dhabi office, for example, for assistant managers, I need to find 2,900 hours of work over the next 6 months in order to make sure that I am actually having the right number of people for it. You can also see, for example, where I have too many people. So in this case, you know, in the next 3 months, I actually have too many hours assigned to my A3 grades, which is my year 3s in the Abu Dhabi office. So that's definitely someone who needs more work throwing at them. And so from this, you get a really good high-level ability to diagnose exactly what your hiring plan should look like. And through other Dayshape features such as traits, we're also able to really micro that down and actually understand how many French speakers you need to hire, as an example. So there we go. That's obviously a very brief overview of the 3 steps. So we obviously covered how to plan flexibly, how to assign flexibly, and now obviously the end piece is how that impacts this large scale capacity forecasting view. And on that bombshell, I'm going to hand over to Andrew. And of course, if you do want a more deep demo with us, please do get in touch.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Yeah, great to see some of the features in action there, and credit to Stuart there. Usually our demos are an hour and a half, so that was extremely efficiently done. Yes, that was just the tip of the iceberg of the product, though, of course. And if you would like some extra information, or you would like to get a more detailed and personalized demonstration, then please do reach out. Either you can see there on screen the URL dayshape.com/demo, or of course just let us know in the chat, and we will reach out to you. So I think the final few minutes we were going to take a few questions. So if you have any questions, then please put them into the chat, and I can see we've got a couple in there. So I will run through a couple, and if we don't get time to cover your question, then apologies for that, but we will get back in touch via email to make sure you do get them answered if we run out of time. So let me have a look at what we got here. So the final slide is not showing. Oh, apologies for that. Is that? It's me being... hopefully it is now. Right, sorry about that. Yes, so we've got why can you see people's names in the timeline view, but not the first scheduling step? So there's a distinction here because the first page, which Stuart was showing you, that's really where your engagement manager is requesting staff, and they are not assigned at that point. So that's really where that flexibility comes in. They're really resource profiles that you're requesting. You could have someone's name on there if you were requesting a specific individual, but even then it wouldn't mean that that work was actually assigned onto them at that point. Whereas in the second view that Stuart was showing you, that's the work that's actually assigned. And it's a concept in Dayshape we have of work being able to exist independently of it actually being assigned onto an individual person. Hopefully that answers that one. We've got another question. The Dayshape website mentions AI. Please could you explain to me which processes in the software can be automated? So we didn't have time to get into loads of the automation today, but there are a couple of really key areas where automation is applied or possible to be applied in the software. It is very configurable, I would add up front. So it's really up to each customer how or whether they want to use it and in what way they want to use it. The major one is, of course, around the resource assignment itself. So Dayshape's AI can do a lot of that, finding the best fit of staff for a given booking. It can do a lot of that for you, and it can come back with suggestions so that as a resource manager, you can just review those suggestions. And once you really build up that trust in the system, you can just start letting it make those assignments. Worth noting there that, we always very much believe that the people in a professional services firm need to have the final say. So Dayshape never gets into a sort of computer says no situation. It's really there to assist, to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and to allow the resource managers to apply the sort of human touch when there are things that the system just simply can't or shouldn't know about, and make those exceptions. Another big area of automation for us is around the workflows of engagements. We didn't really cover that today, just in the interest of time, but it's possible to build in a lot of automated controls around the workflows and the economics. Just to give a very simple example, if you were wanting to set a minimum margin threshold for a given engagement, then you're able to do that in Dayshape, and then it will become an automated part of your workflow. So in order for an engagement to become approved and assigned out, it may require, for example, a second level of approval if the margin is below that threshold. That is super, super customizable. So customers use that in all different kinds of ways for weird and wonderful things. That's very automatable as well. And I think we've got, that's it. Yes, so it looks like we're kind of wrapping up pretty much bang on time. So again, I would just like to thank everyone very much for joining us today. And again, final plug, if you want to get further information, then dayshape.com/demo is the place to go, or just simply reach out to us on the chat or the Q&A. Thanks again, and I will wrap it up there. Cheers.